Teacher tries to embarrass black janitor, regrets it when she plays like a pro. The moment the first note rang out, the room fell silent. Not a single breath, not a single word. Just that hauntingly beautiful sound, rising from a woman no one had ever truly seen before. Elaine Turner, the aging janitor in her faded navy uniform, sat upright at the grand piano. Her hands, worn and calloused from years of scrubbing floors and wiping windows, moved with a grace no one in the room could have imagined. Her eyes were closed, her face still, but her fingers spoke in a language older than words. No one could believe it. Not the students, not the staff, and certainly not Miss Harper, the music teacher who had smugly invited Elaine into the room minutes earlier, expecting nothing more than a humiliating joke. But what Miss Harper got instead was a performance that shook the foundation of everything she believed about class, race, and worth. It hadn't started like this. Earlier that same morning, before the applause, before the silence, before the music changed everything, Willow Creek Prep was its usual polished self. Morning sunlight bounced off luxury SUVs as teenagers in pressed uniforms streamed through the gates. Laughter, light chatter, the clatter of expensive boots on marble floors. It was all just background noise to Elaine as she quietly pushed her mop bucket down the west corridor. No one greeted her. They never did. She was just the janitor. But she didn't need their smiles. She had a routine. Scrub the science wing before first period, tidy the cafeteria after breakfast rush, restock paper towels near the gym, then disappear. That's how the staff preferred it. Out of sight, out of mind. Except today she had accidentally bumped shoulders with someone she normally avoided, Ms. Harper. "Watch it," Harper snapped, brushing a speck of invisible dust off her blazer. "Do you not have eyes?" Elaine stepped back immediately. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." But Harper had already walked away, heels clicking sharply down the hall. Ms. Veronica Harper wasn't just any teacher. She ran the music department like her own private kingdom. She came from old money, sported vintage pearl earrings, and carried herself like she belonged in a Manhattan opera house. Her classes were elite, invitation only. She taught piano, composition, and voice, and only to students she considered gifted. Translation: rich, white, and prestigious. Elaine obviously didn't fit that description. What Harper didn't know, what no one at Willow Creek knew, was that Elaine Turner hadn't always been a janitor. Decades ago, she'd been something else entirely. But that part of her life was locked away, forgotten. She had her reasons. Until today. It started during Harper's third-period music theory class. She was showcasing a new digital piano installed in the auditorium and inviting her top students to try it out. Laughter echoed through the room as Harper critiqued each performance with her signature sarcasm. "Too flat, Ryan. We're not playing funeral marches here." "Candace, it's Bach, not Beyoncé." The students laughed. No one ever challenged her. Then someone made a joke, a dumb, offhand comment. "You should let the janitor try," said Kyle, a rich kid with slicked-back hair and an ego to match. "Bet she knows all the tunes from the 1950s. Laughter exploded. Harper paused, then chuckled. "You know," she said slowly, turning toward the open door, "that's not a bad idea." Elaine was passing by, pushing her cart quietly as always. Harper called out, her voice sugar-coated with false charm. "Elaine! Would you mind joining us for a second?" Elaine froze. She turned slowly, unsure what she'd just walked into. "I'm in the middle of—" "Oh, come now," Harper interrupted. "Don't be shy. You know your way around a piano, right? I've seen you dusting this one often enough." The students laughed again. Elaine's stomach twisted. This wasn't an invitation. It was a trap. Harper gestured toward the bench. "Come on, play us something." The room went quiet. Everyone was waiting for a disaster, waiting for a joke, waiting to laugh. Elaine stood there for a long moment, eyes darting between the students, the piano, and Harper's smug smile. She should have said no, should have walked away. But then something stirred, a memory, a spark, and without another word Elaine walked slowly to the bench and sat down. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingers, too familiar, like breathing. She closed her eyes, and she played. It started softly, a few notes, unsure, trembling. Then came the melody, deep, bold, a rendition of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, reinterpreted with soul and pain and power. Each note was perfectly timed, filled with elegance, restraint, and aching memory. No one moved, no one laughed. By the time she hit the second movement, even Harper had lowered her clipboard. The silence in the room was complete. Elaine finished the piece, held the final note with a trembling hand, and then slowly lifted her fingers from the keys. Still, no one moved. Then someone, no one remembers who, started to clap. One by one, the room joined in. Stunned, moved, confused. Harper stood frozen at the front of the class, her cheeks flushed red, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Elaine stood, dusted her uniform, and gave Harper a single, measured look. Then she walked out of the room without a word, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Back in the hallway, Elaine leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. And behind her, a room full of students and a very embarrassed teacher began to question everything they thought they knew. Because the janitor they tried to mock had just played like a pro. And that was only the beginning. Elaine Turner hadn't expected the applause. She hadn't expected anything, really. Just silence, maybe laughter, and then her usual quiet return to the hallways where people barely noticed her. But applause, that had shaken her just as much as it had shaken everyone else. She didn't go back to her supply closet right away. Instead, she slipped into the empty staff lounge, sat in the corner by the vending machines, and let her breath settle. Her hands still tingled from the keys, not just from the physical strain of playing, but from something deeper, something electric. She hadn't played like that in years, not in front of anyone, not since everything fell apart. She stared down at her palms. The rough, calloused skin told the story of a life far removed from piano benches and spotlight stages. And yet, today, she had played as if nothing had changed. Down the hall, the buzz was spreading like wildfire. Did you see her hands? I swear to God, she played better than Harper ever has. Where the hell did she learn to play like that? In the music room, Ms. Veronica Harper stood motionless. Her students whispered around her, their voices darting from disbelief to admiration, to shock. She gripped her clipboard tightly, her knuckles white. She should have laughed it off. Made a joke, something like, well, who knew cleaning keys helped with muscle memory? But she couldn't, because for the first time in a long while, Harper had been completely and utterly upstaged, and by someone she didn't even consider her equal. By someone she barely saw. A janitor. She marched out of the room with long, stiff strides, heels clicking with force. She didn't speak to anyone, just stormed past them all, down the corridor, and into her office, where she locked the door behind her. Inside, she threw her clipboard on the desk, yanked open her bottom drawer, and pulled out a dusty yearbook. The pages were yellowed, the cover cracked. She flipped quickly through, her eyes scanning the black and white photos of piano recitals from decades past. There she was, Elaine Turner, class of 1984, young, bright-eyed, elegant. First place in statewide piano competition 3 years running. Full scholarship to Juilliard. Harper stared at the photo, stunned. Number it couldn't be. She grabbed her phone, tapped furiously into Google. A few moments later, she was reading a short article from a community archive. Local prodigy Elaine Turner drops out of Juilliard, disappears from music scene. No explanation, no follow-up. Harper's fingers trembled. She had mocked a woman who, at one point, had been better than she ever was. Back in the hallway, the students were still buzzing. Candace, one of Harper's star pupils, leaned into Kyle and whispered, "I looked her up. Miss Turner used to be a concert pianist. She was on track to be huge." Kyle blinked. Then why the hell is she here mopping floors? The question lingered. No one had an answer. Elaine, meanwhile, returned to her closet, slowly changing into her cardigan and grabbing her purse. Her shift was over. As she slipped out the back door, the sky was turning orange, casting long shadows across the pavement. She walked with her head a little higher than usual, but her thoughts were still jumbled. It had felt good to play, like waking up after a long, dark sleep. But she also knew what might come next. Exposure, questions, attention she never asked for, and she wasn't sure she was ready. She took the long way home, walking down side streets, past the bakery where she used to play for tips as a teenager, past the old Civic Theater where she once had her first recital. The town had changed, new coffee shops, condos, electric buses, but she hadn't. Not really. She'd just hidden. That night, she cooked herself a small dinner, watched the evening news without listening, and finally pulled out the dusty box from the closet. Inside were yellowed programs, old photographs, and a single faded envelope from Juilliard. Her acceptance letter. She ran her fingers across the ink. It felt like touching the ghost of another life. Meanwhile, Harper was still in her office, replaying the music in her mind. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The next morning at school, everything felt different. Elaine was early, as always. But this time, people noticed her. Students who normally looked through her now slowed their steps. One nodded politely. Another offered a quiet, "Good morning." It felt strange, but the real surprise came when Principal Graves showed up outside the music room during second period. "Elaine Turner?" he asked, spotting her across the hall. She turned slowly. "Yes." He smiled politely. "May I have a word?" They stepped into his office. Elaine sat down, unsure what to expect. "I heard about what happened in music class yesterday," he said. "A few students spoke to me. Even a couple parents emailed. They were deeply moved." Elaine said nothing. Graves continued. "Listen, I'll be honest. I didn't know about your background. I had no idea. I just thought you were—" "A janitor," she said calmly, meeting his eyes. He flinched. "Well, yes. I mean, no disrespect." "None taken," she replied. He shifted in his seat. "Look, I'm not sure how you'd feel about this, but we're hosting our annual spring showcase in 2 weeks. Usually it's run entirely by the music department, but given the attention you've drawn, would you consider performing?" Elaine's heart skipped. "I'm not asking for an answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it. The offer stands." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." When she stepped out of his office, Harper was standing at the end of the hallway, arms folded, watching her. Their eyes met. Neither said a word. But in that silence, something passed between them. Not truce, not peace, something more dangerous. A challenge. Because Harper was already planning her next move. And this time, it wouldn't be as simple as a sarcastic invitation to embarrass a janitor. This time, it would be war. And Elaine? She was no longer interested in hiding. Not after the music reminded her of who she really was. She was ready. But so was Harper, and neither of them had any idea how far this would go. The morning sun hadn't even fully risen when Elaine stepped into the school's front lobby, mop bucket rolling beside her. She preferred it that way, Quiet, empty halls, the distant hum of lights still warming up, and no curious eyes following her every step. At least, that's how it used to be. Today was different. The moment she walked into the main corridor, she could feel it, like static in the air. Whispers, glances. A few students paused mid-conversation when they spotted her. Some nodded awkwardly, others just stared like they were seeing her for the first time. Elaine didn't slow her pace. She kept her gaze forward, her face calm, but her heart beat a little faster. Down the east wing, Harper stood inside her classroom, arms folded, watching through the glass as Elaine passed. Her lips were pressed into a thin, unreadable line. On her desk sat a fresh stack of music sheets, her lesson plan for the week completely redrafted. She had no intention of letting things spiral out of her control. When the final bell rang that morning, the music room filled quickly. Students chatted, some still buzzing about the impromptu performance from the day before. "I heard she used to play at Carnegie Hall," Candace whispered to Kyle, eyes wide. "That's not true," Kyle replied, eyes still on the door. "Is it? I don't know. But did you see Harper's face? She looked like she wanted to crawl under the piano." The chatter came to a halt the moment Harper walked in. She looked perfectly composed, not a hair out of place. Her tone was cool as always when she spoke. "Today," she announced, "we're starting a new unit on performance dynamics. But first," she paused, glancing at the back of the room, "I want to talk about yesterday." A few students shifted in their seats. "Some of you were surprised," she continued, "to learn that Ms. Turner, our janitor, has a musical background. And yes, she has some experience with the piano. But let's not mistake a single moment of nostalgia for professional-level talent." The room went dead quiet. Elaine, who had been mopping quietly just outside the classroom door, stopped. She hadn't planned to listen, but her name echoing through the room froze her in place. Harper wasn't finished. "There's a reason real artists spend years mastering the stage," she said. "And while Ms. Turner's little moment yesterday was charming, it doesn't replace training, consistency, or depth." Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. The message was clear. Kyle opened his mouth to say something, but Harper shot him a look that stopped the words before they could form. Outside, Elaine stood motionless. She wasn't surprised. Not really. Harper's pride wouldn't allow her to accept being outshined, especially by someone she considered beneath her. But the sting, that still hurt. She pushed the mop forward, trying to drown out the ache in her chest with the soft squeak of rubber wheels and wet cloth. But the words stuck with her all day. Nostalgia, charming, doesn't replace training. The irony nearly made her laugh. If only Harper knew. At lunchtime, Elaine sat alone on the back steps of the building, a small container of soup balanced on her lap. She wasn't eating, just staring into the distance. "You okay?" came a voice behind her. She turned to see Candace holding a sandwich, awkwardly shifting from one foot to the other. Elaine blinked. "Yes. Thank you." Candace hesitated, then sat beside her. "I just wanted to say, what you did yesterday, it was incredible." Elaine offered a faint smile. "I appreciate that. I think Miss Harper's just scared," Candace added. "She's never had anyone challenge her like that. Especially not someone she thought she was better than." Elaine nodded slowly. "People like her live inside a box. Anything outside of it scares them." Candace bit into her sandwich, then paused. "Is it true? Did you used to perform?" Elaine looked away. "A long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" There it was, the question she'd been avoiding for years. "I didn't want to," she said finally, "but life doesn't always go the way you plan. Some doors close no matter how hard you knock." Candace stayed quiet, respectful. After a long pause, Elaine turned to her. You play, don't you? Candace looked surprised. How do you know? The way you watched me yesterday, Elaine said softly. I've seen that look before. It's the same one I used to have when I watched my first teacher perform. Candace smiled shyly. Yeah, I've been playing since I was 6. Good, Elaine said. Then keep playing. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Candace looked down at her lap, then up at Elaine with a new kind of admiration. That afternoon, Harper called a private meeting with Principal Graves. I'm concerned about the distraction, she said crisply. Ever since that little stunt, the students have been unfocused. They're idolizing someone who hasn't been musically active in decades. Graves folded his hands calmly. You mean Elaine Turner? Harper's jaw tightened. Yes. I saw the video a student posted, Graves replied. She's remarkable. With respect, she is not a teacher. She's staff. This is setting a dangerous precedent. Graves leaned back in his chair. The only thing dangerous, Veronica, is the idea that we should suppress talent because of job titles. Harper stared at him, lips parting slightly. You're siding with her. I'm siding with what's best for the school, Graves said, which right now includes allowing someone with rare ability to be recognized, regardless of her current position. Harper said nothing more, but her eyes burned with restrained fury. That night she sat in her apartment surrounded by sheet music, wine untouched beside her. She ran her hands over the keys of her baby grand, playing the same passage again and again, each time a little harder, a little faster. The notes were perfect, sharp, precise, but they weren't beautiful, because something had shifted. And for the first time in her life, Veronica Harper was questioning whether all her accomplishments, all her awards, all her hard-won recognition had been enough to build real respect, or just fear and image. Across town, Elaine sat at her upright piano in the small church. No audience, no students, just her and the quiet. Her fingers danced slowly, not seeking perfection, just peace. She thought about the showcase offer, about the risk, about Harper. She wasn't just fighting one person. She was fighting everything Harper represented. But somewhere inside her, a part that had slept for decades, had finally opened its eyes, and it was ready to rise. The following Monday arrived with a tension so thick it could be felt even in the air between classroom walls. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Elaine Turner, the janitor, had been officially invited to perform at the Spring Arts Showcase by Principal Graves himself. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It was on the morning bulletin, right beneath the cafeteria's lunch menu and above the announcement for upcoming AP exams. In the main faculty lounge, the news hit like a gust of cold wind. Some teachers chuckled uncomfortably, others whispered behind coffee cups. But the sharpest reaction came from Veronica Harper, who stared blankly at the announcement memo pinned to the board. She's a janitor, she muttered under her breath, as if saying it enough times would reverse reality. Not a guest performer. Mr. Stanley from the math department cleared his throat. Did you hear her play, Veronica? Harper didn't look away from the memo. I did. Well, she was pretty incredible. I don't measure talent by a single song and a sympathetic crowd, Harper replied curtly, turning on her heel and walking out of the lounge. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor as if announcing war. At lunchtime, Elaine quietly cleaned the hallway outside the music room. She had already heard the buzz. Students stopping her to ask about the performance, some teachers nodding to her with an awkward politeness that wasn't there before. She was no longer invisible, and she wasn't sure if that made her feel empowered or exposed. The double doors of the music room suddenly swung open. Harper emerged carrying a stack of folders and that same rehearsed smile that never quite reached her eyes. Elaine, she said smoothly. A word? Elaine paused. Of course. They stepped into the now empty music room. The silence between them stretched. "I understand you're performing in the showcase," Harper began. Elaine met her gaze calmly. "Yes." There was a pause. Harper's lips twitched, as if she was searching for the right kind of condescension. "Don't get me wrong," she said. "Your performance the other day, well, it surprised us all. But the showcase is a formal event. Students prepare for months, sometimes years. Their reputations, college applications, ride on it." Elaine tilted her head. "Are you suggesting I'd ruin that?" "I'm suggesting we keep standards," Harper said coolly. "And if this is about giving the students some inspiration, maybe you could share a short story instead. Something heartfelt, uplifting." Elaine let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You want me to talk about mopping floors while the others play? I think it would be more appropriate." There it was, the mask slipping, the condescension underneath. "I've spent more years on a piano than most of these kids have been alive," Elaine said, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't need your permission to take up space on that stage." Harper stiffened. "It's not about permission. It's about protecting the tone of the event." "No," Elaine said, stepping forward, her gaze sharp. "It's about you not knowing how to handle someone you thought you were better than." For a moment Harper was stunned into silence, but the tension in her jaw gave her away. Her composure was cracking. "Have a good afternoon," Elaine added, walking away without waiting for a reply. That evening Harper sat at her desk long after sunset. The room was dimly lit, her face washed in the blue glow of her laptop screen. She wasn't reading lesson plans. She was scouring the internet, searching for anything she could use. Elaine Turner, janitor, musician. Something didn't add up. Harper dug deeper, and then she found it. A photo from 30 years ago. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. "Elaine Dubois," Harper whispered. She stared at the caption. "Rising star in classical piano, performs at New York Youth Philharmonic. Critics call her the next Nina Simone of classical music." Harper leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. For a moment her hands trembled. The woman she tried to humiliate wasn't just some has-been hobbyist, she had been a prodigy. And suddenly the fear Harper had kept buried began clawing its way to the surface. Across town, Elaine sat at her church piano once again, her fingers trailing across the keys, lost in memory. The name Dubois hadn't passed anyone's lips in decades. It was the name she once held when she filled Carnegie's chamber hall with thunderous applause. The name that, after too many closed doors, she had left behind. Now it was just Elaine Turner. And maybe that was the point. She didn't want to return to who she was. She wanted to prove that who she was now, older, overlooked, invisible to most, still held power, still held something no one could take from her. Her music. She began to play again, but this time not to remember. She played to prepare, because now she understood something she hadn't quite admitted before. This wasn't just about reclaiming a stage. It was about making sure no one like Harper could ever silence someone like her again. And that meant when the night of the showcase arrived, she wouldn't just be performing. She would be making a statement, one Harper would never forget. The morning sun cast a golden light over the courtyard of Langston Preparatory Academy, but inside the music wing, a different kind of tension hung in the air. Thick, charged, and unspoken. Students whispered in hallways. Teachers glanced sideways at each other. Elaine Turner, the school's longtime janitor, was the subject of every conversation. Her upcoming performance at the Spring Arts Showcase had thrown the school into a quiet frenzy. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some, like Veronica Harper, were quietly unraveling. In her classroom, Harper stood stiffly by the grand piano. Her posture was perfect, her lips drawn tight, but her eyes darted toward the clock every few seconds. It was the first day of full rehearsals for the showcase, and Principal Graves had made it clear, everyone gets equal rehearsal time, including Ms. Turner. The idea grated on Harper like sandpaper. The students filed in, murmuring about what song Elaine might play. Would she really perform solo? What if she wasn't as good as people said? At the back of the room, Madeline Blake, one of Harper's top students, leaned in to whisper to her friend Sasha. I still can't believe she's doing this. I mean, she cleans the floors. Sasha looked around nervously. You saw how she played that day, though. That was real. Maybe. But it doesn't mean she belongs on that stage. She's not us. Harper cleared her throat. All right, quiet down. Let's stay focused. Our goal is perfection. As she paced between the rows of chairs, her heels clicking with mechanical precision, her voice dropped just slightly. And remember, this showcase sets the tone for your future. Scholarships, college reps, family expectations. Let's make sure no one, unqualified, steals your moment. Some students exchanged glances. The subtext wasn't subtle. Moments later, Principal Graves appeared at the door. His presence quieted the room instantly. Good morning, he said, his voice calm but authoritative. I'm just here to remind you that Ms. Turner's rehearsal is scheduled for noon today. Please ensure the room is ready for her. Harper's jaw tightened. Of course. Graves nodded, then paused. I'd also like to see everyone here at the showcase. Every one of you can learn something from someone who's lived a life filled with music, even if that life wasn't wrapped in applause. And with that, he left. At exactly noon, the door opened again. Elaine stepped inside. She was dressed simply, black slacks, a pale lavender blouse, and a cardigan. Her hair was pinned back neatly. No mop, no cot, just her. The room stilled. Some students fidgeted, unsure of how to react. Others sat straighter, not out of respect, but curiosity, perhaps waiting to see if the first performance had been a fluke. Harper stood by the piano, arms crossed, icy smile in place. Miss Turner, she said sweetly, you're early. Elaine gave a small smile. I'm used to arriving before the mess. Several students looked up at that, their eyes flicking between the two women. Harper didn't blink. Well, the piano is yours. I hope you find it satisfactory. Elaine stepped toward the instrument with quiet confidence. She brushed her fingers lightly across the polished keys, then sat down. The room held its breath. She began to play, not with the tentative grace of her first classroom performance, but with full-bodied, intentional power. It was Rachmaninoff this time, bold, stormy, demanding. Her fingers danced across the keys with a force that made the air pulse. The room, once filled with chatter and doubt, now fell under the spell of her music. Even Harper, arms still crossed, found herself frozen. There was no trembling now, no flicker of doubt in Elaine's hands. The sound that filled the space was raw, breathtaking, unapologetically powerful. Students sat forward in their seats. One of the violinists, watching from the corner, whispered, She's incredible. Madeline Blake shifted uncomfortably. The certainty she once felt about her own solo now seemed smaller. When Elaine reached the final crashing chords, she lifted her hands and let the echo fade into silence. The room didn't clap. Not because it wasn't moved, but because it couldn't yet comprehend what had just happened. Elaine stood, her breath steady, her expression calm. She looked toward Harper, who was still speechless. Will that be all? She asked gently. Harper finally blinked. Yes, that will, suffice. Elaine turned and walked out, her heels soft against the floor, but each step a quiet declaration. I belong here. Later that day, Harper stormed into her office, slamming the door behind her. She pulled out her laptop again. This time, she wasn't looking for Elaine's past. She was trying to contact the showcase committee. She typed an email with shaking fingers. Subject: Urgent, regarding showcase lineup. But halfway through the message, she stopped. The image of Elaine's hands, steady, controlled, utterly masterful, lingered in her mind. And for the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced her pride. That night, Elaine returned to the church piano. Her hands ached, her bones were tired, but her spirit had never felt more alive. The path ahead was no longer about redemption. It was about justice, about making sure that no one like Harper could ever write someone like her off again. And deep inside, she knew. The real performance hadn't even begun yet. It was the week before the Spring Arts Showcase, and the auditorium buzzed with activity. The students rehearsed with a renewed intensity, not just for the applause, but for something else, something that had shifted quietly beneath the surface. Ever since Elaine Turner's jaw-dropping rehearsal, a subtle tremor had run through Langston Preparatory Academy. For the first time, someone outside the school's golden circle had seized the spotlight and refused to let go. Inside the faculty lounge, the air was colder than usual. Veronica Harper sat stiffly at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee, her lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't used to losing control, especially not like this. Across from her sat Principal Graves, arms folded as he studied her. His tone was calm, but his words cut with quiet precision. "Veronica, I've been hearing things. Not from students, but staff, parents, even board members." She raised her eyebrows with feigned surprise. "Oh? Rumors that you've expressed discomfort with Ms. Turner performing." Harper gave a tight smile. "I simply raised professional concerns. We have a tradition to uphold. Standards. It's not personal." Graves leaned in slightly. "But it is personal, isn't it? She embarrassed you. You tried to turn her into a joke, but it didn't land." Silence stretched between them. Harper's fingers tightened on the coffee cup. "She's not one of us," she said finally, her voice quiet but charged. "She doesn't belong on that stage. It's not about talent. It's about image. Elaine Turner is a janitor." "And Rachmaninoff didn't seem to care," Graves replied flatly. Harper stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake. This school is about excellence. We don't reward sentiment." Graves didn't flinch. "You're right. It's about excellence, which is why she's staying on the program. And I suggest you remember, this showcase is about more than just showmanship. It's about truth." Harper stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots down the hallway. But her confidence had cracked, and worse, the students were watching. Back in the rehearsal room, whispers spread faster than sheet music. "Did you hear?" Madeline Blake asked as she adjusted her violin. "Ms. Harper tried to pull Elaine off the program." "No way," said Sasha. "Seriously?" Madeline nodded. "Coach Darnell overheard a meeting. She's furious that the spotlight isn't on us anymore." "She's scared," Sasha muttered, "because Elaine's the real deal." In a quiet corner of campus, Elaine was seated on a weathered bench under an old oak tree. She stared out at the soccer field, lost in thought. Since the day of her rehearsal, she hadn't just been cleaning the halls. She'd been cleaning up the chaos that followed it. Whispers, looks, passive-aggressive comments, but also unexpected kindness. A student named Julian, one of the percussionists, had approached her yesterday with a shy smile and asked if she had any recordings of her playing. Another girl, Marisol, had helped carry her cart up the stairs without being asked. Small things, but they mattered. Elaine? She turned and saw Miss Collins, the English teacher, approaching with a kind smile. "You've started something," Collins said as she sat beside her. "This place is different now." Elaine gave a weary smile. "Some differences don't sit well with people." Collins chuckled. "That's usually how you know they're necessary." There was a pause, and then Elaine looked at her, something quiet and uncertain in her eyes. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Collins didn't hesitate. I think you're doing what should have been done a long time ago. Elaine nodded slowly. I just never expected to still feel this exposed. You're not exposed, Collins said gently. You're seen. That night, the school released the final program list for the showcase. Elaine's name was printed right below Madeline's and above the faculty ensemble. It was official now. Harper saw it and froze. She stared at the page in disbelief, her fingers trembling. But what struck her more than Elaine's name was the quote underneath it. Sometimes the greatest stages are found after sweeping through the darkest corners. It wasn't just a performance anymore, it was a reckoning. The next morning, Harper arrived early. Too early. The building was still quiet. She walked into the music room, her heels echoing off the polished floors, and stood at the piano. She ran her fingers across the keys, not playing, just touching. There was a strange emptiness in her chest. She had always believed she was in control, that her status, her title, her perfection were enough to define who belonged and who didn't. But now, a janitor had changed the rules, not with rebellion, not with power, but with truth. And Harper didn't know how to fight that. She looked up at the mirror behind the piano. Her own reflection stared back, flawless, poised, and hollow. Meanwhile, on the other side of campus, Elaine was in the small church again, running through her piece one last time. Her hands moved with strength and elegance, her posture relaxed, her heart full. It was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming herself. And when the final note faded into the silence of the chapel, she smiled softly and whispered to the empty room, "Let's finish this." The night of the Spring Arts Showcase had finally arrived, and Langston Preparatory Academy had never looked more radiant. The grand auditorium, usually filled with polite applause and carefully curated performances, was now packed with an audience buzzing with anticipation, gossip, and curiosity. Word had spread beyond the school. A janitor was set to perform alongside the school's most elite students. Some came expecting a train wreck. Others came hoping for a miracle. Backstage, the atmosphere was tense. Students huddled in corners, reviewing sheet music, fixing bows, whispering nervously. In the dressing room, Madeline Blake ran a hand through her curls, glancing toward the curtain. "Have you seen Ms. Turner?" she asked Sasha. Sasha nodded. "She's in the green room, calm as ever, like this is just another Tuesday." Madeline shook her head, impressed. "She's got more guts than all of us combined." In the green room, Elaine sat quietly at the edge of a worn velvet sofa, dressed in a sleek, elegant black gown that shimmered under the overhead light. Her silver-gray hair was pinned back neatly, and her posture was graceful but unassuming. She held no sheet music, no nervous twitch, no visible sign of doubt. Only calm, the kind of calm that comes from surviving far more intimidating stages than this. But beneath her composed exterior, her heart beat hard against her ribs. She'd played for no one for so long. Empty churches, silent nights, abandoned dreams. Tonight the silence would be filled by hundreds of eyes, including many who once mocked her, dismissed her, or didn't even know her name. She took a breath. "You ready?" a voice asked gently. It was Ms. Collins peeking in from the hallway. Elaine smiled and nodded. "I've been ready for 30 years. Meanwhile, at the far end of the auditorium, Veronica Harper stood near the faculty seats, arms folded, lips pursed. She looked stunning as always in a tailored navy blue pantsuit, but her usual confidence had fractured into brittle edges. The applause, the energy in the room, it wasn't for her. It hadn't been for days. As the performances began, students took the stage with well-rehearsed numbers, duets, choral harmonies, instrumental solos. The crowd applauded dutifully, but the air held a restless tension. Everyone was waiting. When Madeline's name was announced, she played a technically perfect violin solo, earning solid applause and polite admiration. But it felt like a warm-up. The audience leaned in, waiting for the thing they'd really come to see. Then it came. The lights dimmed slightly. A hush swept through the room. A single spotlight illuminated the gleaming black piano at center stage. And now, the MC said, "Please welcome Ms. Elaine Turner." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the name echoed across the room. Several students sat straighter. Parents leaned in. Veronica Harper's jaw clenched tightly. Elaine stepped into the light. Her heels clicked softly on the wooden floor as she crossed the stage with calm, measured grace. She didn't smile or bow. She simply nodded once, approached the piano, and took her seat. She adjusted the bench, rested her hands in her lap. Then she looked up, just once, into the sea of faces staring at her. She spotted Veronica, saw the tension in her jaw, the disbelief in her eyes. Elaine met that gaze and held it, not with anger or arrogance, but with something stronger. Peace. Then she turned back to the piano. Her fingers hovered for a moment, suspended like breath. And then she played. The opening notes were soft, fragile, like a memory unfolding. But within seconds the melody swelled into something fierce, elegant, and full of life. It wasn't just a performance, it was a release. Each note poured decades of silence, struggle, and buried passion into the air. It was storytelling without words, emotion without boundaries. The auditorium was frozen. No one shifted in their seats. No one whispered. Even the teachers who'd once rolled their eyes when they passed her in the hallway were transfixed. Elaine's fingers danced over the keys, her back straight, eyes closed. She didn't need to see the audience. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for the girl she used to be. For every young musician who gave up because the world said they weren't enough. For every moment she'd been overlooked. This was hers. The final chord rang out like a bell shimmering into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. And then, like thunder following lightning, came the applause. It was deafening. People stood to their feet, clapping, shouting. Some students whistled. Others had tears in their eyes. Even teachers were standing. Elaine stood slowly, bowed once, and turned to walk off stage. In the wings, Madeline and Sasha were crying. "That was," Madeleine breathed, "that was something else." Elaine smiled and wiped the corner of her eye. "Thank you." Back in the audience, Harper remained seated. She didn't clap, couldn't. Her face was pale, her expression stunned. Around her, faculty she once controlled were cheering. Parents she'd once tried to impress were recording the performance, their eyes fixed only on Elaine. She turned slowly, walked out of the auditorium, and disappeared down the hallway. Alone. Backstage, Principal Graves met Elaine with a wide, genuine smile. "You just rewrote the meaning of this entire school," he said. Elaine chuckled softly. "I didn't rewrite it. I just reminded people of the original notes." And with that, the janitor who had once gone unnoticed walked past the principal, past the staff, through the backstage door, carrying not just her music, but a new legacy. And the world would never see her the same again. The echoes of Elaine's performance still lingered in the halls of Langston Prep long after the crowd had left the auditorium. The chatter was different now, not the usual gossip about grades or spring formal. People were talking about her, the janitor who played like a concert pianist, the woman everyone had ignored for years. Monday morning, the school was buzzing with a kind of nervous excitement. Students gathered in the halls, whispering in hushed tones. "Did you see her hands?" one student said, awestruck. "Like they were telling a whole story." Another chimed in, "My mom cried during the performance." She literally cried. Somewhere in the back hallway, Sasha and Madeline were slipping posters into their lockers when Miss Collins approached. "Girls," she said gently, "would you be willing to help me with something this afternoon?" Sasha smiled. "If it's about the music program, we're in." "Good. We're meeting with the board. There's a proposal to honor Ms. Turner permanently. It's time her contribution means more than whispers in a hallway." Madeline blinked. "You mean like naming something after her?" Miss Collins nodded. "The auditorium, or maybe the music wing. And we're reviewing some hiring practices, too. A few of us think it's time to dismantle a culture that made a woman like Elaine invisible." For the first time, the girls understood just how big that performance had been. Meanwhile, in the janitor's closet that had once felt like her only refuge, Elaine folded up her uniform for the last time. She had never hated the job, but she had outgrown it. That chapter of quiet endurance had served its purpose. Now something else was waiting. She heard a soft knock on the door. It was Principal Graves. He stepped inside, looking both proud and slightly nervous. "Miss Turner, may I call you Elaine now?" "You always could," she said with a smile. "I just wanted to say, I was wrong about so many things, about you." Elaine's expression softened. "You didn't see me because you weren't looking. But you're looking now." Graves nodded. "The board met this morning. They're offering you a full-time position in the music department. Whatever program you want to run. You'd have full autonomy." She paused, a little taken aback. "Me? Teaching?" He smiled. "You've already taught this school more than we've learned in decades." Elaine looked around the small closet one last time. The mop, the bucket, the uniform. It wasn't shame she felt, just gratitude for surviving it all, for still being here, for being able to say no. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I have something different in mind." He raised an eyebrow. "I want to start a community program," she said, "for the kids no one sees, the ones who can't afford lessons, the ones who are told they aren't good enough. I'll teach them, in this building, but not for this school, for the city, for the people like me." Graves hesitated, then smiled wider than she'd ever seen. "Tell me what you need," he said. By the end of the week, a new sign had been hung outside the small building behind the school's music wing. The Turner Initiative, free music for every voice. The space had been cleared out, old instruments restored, and flyers passed out across neighborhoods no one at Langston Prep had ever thought to reach. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Word spread fast. 1 week later, 20 students walked in. A month later, it was 50. No one cared about skin color or tuition. They came to learn, and Elaine was finally back where she belonged, in front of a piano, not to prove anything, but to pass it on. As for Veronica Harper, her fall came fast. After a formal investigation spurred by anonymous complaints and faculty testimonies, she was placed on administrative leave. Her tenure was suspended pending review. The final nail came from a student, Madeline, who had recorded an offhand, dismissive remark Veronica made about Elaine months before the performance. It aired at the next board meeting. There was no denying it now. When confronted, Veronica tried to defend herself, blaming pressure, the culture, the students. But it didn't matter. Her empire of control had collapsed. She resigned in silence. No applause followed her out. In contrast, at the Spring Awards ceremony, Elaine was honored with a standing ovation by staff, students, and even parents. Principal Graves stood beside her as she received a crystal plaque engraved with "Elaine Turner," for reminding us that greatness has no uniform. In her short speech, Elaine said, "I spent years cleaning these floors, listening to people walk by without seeing me. And I didn't need recognition, but I did need one thing, a chance. Now I want to give that same chance to others." The applause went on for minutes. Later that night, alone in the old church where she used to play to empty pews, Elaine sat again at the piano. But this time she didn't play out of sadness or solitude. She played out of celebration. Madeline had asked if she would perform again in public. She had smiled and said, "Maybe one day. For now, I want to teach others how to take the stage." Outside the church, the air was warm. Spring had fully arrived, and somewhere in the city, a kid with second-hand shoes and a head full of music picked up a flyer with her name on it. This wasn't just a story about a janitor, or a pianist, or even about a teacher who learned too late. It was about every person who's ever been dismissed, every gift that's ever been buried, every heart that's been told to stay quiet, and how sometimes the quietest people leave the loudest impact. If this story moved you, if you've ever doubted your own worth or watched someone powerful try to bury someone beautiful, then let this remind you. True talent doesn't ask for permission to shine. It just waits for the right moment to rise. If you believe in stories that uplift the unheard and give light to those in the shadows, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep the spotlight where it belongs. On truth, on heart, on voices that refuse to stay silent.